Welcome to the Wedge, and this is our Week 7 edition. And as always, we'll be doing our quick picks, our fantasy football picks, our weekly rewind for the week that was, that's Week 6, and our Thursday night upon further review for the Thursday night game. But as always, we get started with the quick picks. First off, on the Thursday night game, we got the New York Jets at the New England Patriots, and I'm going with the Patriots. Then we have the Atlanta Falcons at the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday at 1, and I'm taking the Ravens. Next up, the Minnesota Vikings at the Buffalo Bills, and I'm taking the Buffalo Bills. Then we have Miami, the Dolphins, going to Chicago to face the Bears, and I'm going with the Bears. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals at the Indianapolis Colts, and I'm going with the Colts. Then we have the Cleveland Browns at the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm going with the Cleveland Browns. Then we have the New Orleans Saints at the Detroit Lions, and I'm going with the Lions. Then we have the Carolina Panthers at the Green Bay Packers, and I'm taking the Green Bay Packers. Then we have the Tennessee Titans at the Washington Redskins, and I'm going with Washington. Then we have the Seattle Seahawks at the St. Louis Rams, and I'm taking the Seahawks on the road. Then at 4 o'clock, we have the Kansas City Chiefs at the San Diego Chargers, and I'm going with San Diego. Then we have the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm going with the Cowboys. Then we have the Arizona Cardinals at the Oakland Raiders, and I'm going with the Cardinals. Then on Sunday Night Football, we have the San Francisco 49ers at the Denver Broncos, and I'm going with the Broncos. Then on Monday Night Football, we have the Houston Texans at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm going with Pittsburgh. And now it's time for Fantasy Fortunes. Alright, at quarterback, I like Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers against Carolina. Carolina Panthers let up a lot of points, and their defense has been uncharacteristically soft this year. They've been giving up lots of offensive yardage, especially through the air, and so Rodgers should have a big day. Also like Joe Flacco of the Baltimore Ravens going against Atlanta. Both of those games are at home, and the Ravens have been really strong. Flacco had an excellent game last week, and he's been having a pretty good year. And the Falcons are bad when it comes to pass defense, so Flacco should have a big day. Then at running back, like DeMarco Murray of the Dallas Cowboys against the New York Giants. DeMarco Murray's the number 1 running back in the league. There's no secret about that, and he should have a big day against New York. I also like Ben Tate of the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are going to Jacksonville. Jacksonville has one of the softest defenses in terms of yards allowed and points allowed. So Ben Tate should have 100 yards and he should get into the end zone. Of course, they do split the carries, but Ben Tate takes the bulk of the load, even though he is a little banged up. But then at wide receiver, like Steve Smith of the Baltimore Ravens against Atlanta. Again, that Flacco to Smith, that should be, pretty big connection there as Atlanta lets up some big games to receivers. And it's in Baltimore. Also like Golden Tate of the Detroit Lions against the New Orleans Saints. It's in Detroit, and the Saints have a pretty weak pass defense. And without Megatron playing, Golden Tate is going to see the majority of the action at receiver. Most of the passes are going to be targeted his way. So I like Golden Tate to have a big game. Then at tight end, go with Jordan Reed of the Washington Redskins. He's back off of his injury, and he had a pretty good game last week, and I think he should have an even better game against the Tennessee Titans. The Titans, they're all right, at pass defense, but Reed should have a big game. They let up a lot of points, in Tennessee. But, they didn't let up too many to Jacksonville, but they should let up a lot to Washington. I think the Redskins in D.C. should put up some points, and Reed should be pretty active in that game and should get a touchdown or two. Then at kicker, I like Dan Carpenter of the Buffalo Bills. They're going to be hosting the Minnesota Vikings, and I think Carpenter's going to get plenty of action. I think he should probably get at least 3 or 4 attempts, and he's probably good for a couple of extra points as well, as Buffalo is very likely to run up the score on Minnesota. And so then at defense, I'm also going with those Bills, the Buffalo Bills. And I'll tell you what, not just the fact that their defense is so good and they're one of the top defenses in the league, especially when it comes to points allowed. Also the fact that on special teams, they have the ability to score. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Bills put up some points on special teams, and that goes to credit your defense in fantasy. So that's another reason why. So they got a really good defense, plus the special teams is possibility of scoring. So that's what I'm going with on defense, and those are my fantasy picks for Week 7. Now it's time for the weekly rewind. And first off, let's start off by looking at the stats for Week 6 and the top 5 quarterbacks in Week 6. And number 1 was Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears against the Atlanta Falcons. He had 381 passing yards and a touchdown. Then at number 2 was Andrew Luck of the Indianapolis Colts. He went up against the Texans in Houston, and he had 370 passing yards, along with 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Number 3 was Tom Brady of the New England Patriots, and he was in Buffalo against the Bills, and he had 361 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. And number 4 was Kirk Cousins of the Washington Redskins at the Arizona Cardinals, and he had 354 passing yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And the number 5 quarterback for Week 6 was Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers at the St. Louis Rams. He had 343 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. And if you can see a theme among the top 5 quarterbacks in Week 6, all 5 of them did that on the road. So some big road performances by these quarterbacks. And 4 out of the 5 actually won on the road. The one that lost on the road was Kirk Cousins and the Redskins. So now let's look at the top 5 running backs in Week 6. And number 1, we have LaShawn Shady McCoy of the Philadelphia Eagles against the New York Giants. And he had 149 yards off of 22 carries. Then we had Giovanni Bernard of the Cincinnati Bengals against the Carolina Panthers. He had 137 yards off of 18 carries and 1 touchdown. Then at number 3 was DeMarco Murray of the Dallas Cowboys at the Seattle Seahawks. He had 115 yards off of 29 carries and 1 touchdown. Number 4 was Justin Forsett of the Baltimore Ravens at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He had 111 yards off of 14 carries. And then number 5 was Arian Foster of the Houston Texans against the Colts. And he had 109 yards off of 20 carries, 2 touchdowns in that Thursday night game that they lost there. So that's your top 5 running backs for Week 6. Now at receiver, reception yards. They don't necessarily have to be a receiver. It could be a tight end, but not very likely. It does happen, though, on occasion. But the number 1 receiver was T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. He had 223 receiving yards off of 9 receptions and 1 touchdown. Then number 2 was Alshon Jeffrey of the Chicago Bears at the Atlanta Falcons. He had 5 receptions for 136 receiving yards. Number 3, Demaryius Thomas of the Denver Broncos at the New York Jets. He had 124 receiving yards off of 10 receptions and 1 touchdown. Number 4, Andre Holmes of the Oakland Raiders versus the San Diego Chargers. And he had 121 yards off of just 4 receptions, 2 of which were for touchdowns, so half his receptions were touchdowns. And then number 5 was Mohamed Sanu of the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Carolina Panthers. He had 120 yards with 10 receptions and 1 touchdown. So that's your top 5 receiving stats for Week 6. And for the kickers, Graham Gano, Steven Gostkowski, and Mike Nugent all tied for first with 13 points. They were all 3 for 4 from field goal range. They all made 4 extra points off of 4 attempts. So that's your top stats for Week 6. Now let's look at the top fantasy players for Week 6. And at quarterback, the number 1 fantasy quarterback in Week 6 was Cam Newton of the Carolina Panthers. He had 284 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. He threw 1 interception, but he rushed for 107 yards, and he also rushed for a touchdown for a total of 33 fantasy points. So Cam Newton had a monster game, and that was against the Bengals, and that was in that tie, the first tie of 2014. And then number 2 for fantasy quarterbacks was Joe Flacco, the Baltimore Ravens. He had 306 passing yards and 5 touchdowns for 32 fantasy points. So Flacco came up huge in his game as well. He was on point. That was a blowout, I'll tell you. And then Tom Brady was the number 3 fantasy quarterback of Week 6 for the New England Patriots. He had 361 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. He also rushed for 3 yards. He had 30 fantasy points. So that's your top 3 quarterbacks. Then at running back, the top 3 running backs for Week 6, there was Matt Forte of the Chicago Bears. He had 80 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, along with 77 receiving yards. And they gave him 27 fantasy points to the number 1 running back in fantasy in Week 6. Number 2 was Arian Foster. He had 109 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 32 receiving yards. And they gave him 25 fantasy points. Then a number 3 running back of Week 6 was Giovanni Bernard of the Cincinnati Bengals with 137 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdowns, along with 20 receiving yards for 21 fantasy points. So that was your top 3 running backs for fantasy in Week 6. And then the top 3 receivers of Week 6 from fantasy was T.Y. Hilton was number 1 of the Indianapolis Colts. He had 223 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. They gave him 28 fantasy points. Number 2, we had Andre Holmes of the Oakland Raiders with 121 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns for 24 points. And number 3 was Brandon LaFell of the New England Patriots with 97 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns for 21 fantasy points. Now for tight ends in Week 6 for fantasy, number 1 was Julius Thomas of the Denver Broncos with 51 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns for 17 fantasy points. Number 2 was Jordan Cameron of the Cleveland Browns with 102 receiving yards and 1 touchdown for 16 fantasy points. And the number 3 tight end for Week 6 was Clay Harbor of the Jacksonville Jaguars with 91 receiving yards and a touchdown for 15 fantasy points. And that's your top 3 tight ends for fantasy. And the top kicker in Week 6 was Steven Gostkowski. He had 16 points, but as you said, he was also tied with the other pair of kickers there, as it was a 3-way tie, as all 3 of them there had the 3 field goals and the 4 extra points. And then the best defense in Week 6 was the Detroit Lions, as they only allowed 3 points, and they had 3 interceptions and 8 sacks for a total of 20 fantasy points. So the Detroit Lions, they're the top defense in the league, and they were the top defense in fantasy in Week 6. Now let's look at how our fantasy picks did, the fantasy fortune picks for Week 6. And I'll tell you, it was an abysmal week. 2 of the players got goose eggs. A big fat 0 for Kendall Wright and for Larry Donnell. Just, they did not show up. And they're gone. They're gone off the fantasy. I almost was thinking about giving Larry Donnell another chance, but I ended up going with Jordan Reed in Week 7. Though I almost, even with the goose egg, thought, hey, maybe Larry Donnell, I think he might do something against Dallas, but after he just continues to not show up, after having an early start, he looked like Eli was favoring him. And I mean, even without Victor Cruz, maybe he does something this week, but you got nothing in Week 6. But let's go back and look at the quarterbacks. Matt Ryan, only 14 points. He didn't really do much. He thought he would. I thought he would, but I guess I was wrong. But Blake Bortles actually was a pretty decent pick. He got 20 points. He actually had a big game. I thought he would, and he did. So that was one I got right. And then Matt Forte, I got that right too. Forte came up huge, 27 points. He had a big, day. But that was it. Just those 2, Bortles and Forte. Everybody else was just pathetic. Alshon Jeffrey, he was all right. He actually did pretty decent. but still, there's other guys who were better options. Frank Gore was a big disappointment. I can't believe he just did nothing. He only had 3 points. Prater, he only had 5 points. He missed a couple field goals. And the Chargers D, I mean, what happened? After shutting out the Jets, they go and let up 28 to Oakland. So a miss on that one too. So it was a rough week for the fantasy fortunes, but we keep on rolling, we keep moving forward, and hopefully, with the mixed sub, we got a whole new, bunch of players there for week 7, and we'll see what happens in week 7. But week 6, we're gonna forget that one. At least, I can hang my hat on Matt Forte and Blake Bortles, right? But a couple big misses though with getting right and Larry Donald for sure. So that was the Fantasy Fortune Rewind. Now let's take a look at the quick picks and how we did in week 6. In our quick picks, we actually did pretty good. We were 11 out of 15. Of course, there was the one tie, so we only got 3 wrong, and the tie is a push. That's not wrong or right. So we started off, with the loss there on Thursday night. And I picked the Texans. They were at home. Should have known better. The Colts, they're just their defense has been too strong. And the Texans, I keep picking them, and they keep doing me wrong. So I've wised up on that one. As you've seen, I actually almost picked the Texans against Pittsburgh, but then I went the other way for week 7. But I should have went the other way in week 6, but that was, I started off with the 0-1. But then when we went to the Sunday games at 1 o'clock, did not get one Sunday 1 o'clock game wrong. Of course, there was that tie between Carolina and Cincinnati, but we got the Patriots right. They went to Buffalo. They won that game. Picked the Browns over the Steelers at home. Denver in New York. Detroit in Minnesota. Green Bay in Miami. Tennessee at home against Jacksonville. And Baltimore against Tampa. Got all of those. Pretty simple picks, of course, when you get them right. And in hindsight, it's going to always look easy, but it's not as easy as it looks. Then at 4 o'clock, we were 500 because we got 2 right and 2 wrong at 4 o'clock. We got the Chargers in Oakland right, but then we got the Bears and the Falcons wrong. I went with the Falcons at home. Thought they could pull that one out, but nope, the Bears got them. And hey, I wouldn't really necessarily go back and change that. I was kind of on the fence, but I almost did go with the Bears. But then because they were at home, I figured the Falcons would take it, but it was not a week for the home teams, as we saw that the top 5 quarterback performances were all on the road. And then I picked the Seahawks at home to win over Dallas, and I really can't be ashamed of that loss. The same thing. It's Seahawks at home. Of course I'm going to take the Seahawks. And I said even in the Upon Further Review, hey, if Dallas wins that game, then we're going to have to start, talking about them being a contender for the title this year. And if they hadn't lost that first game, they'd be undefeated. So, no shame in that. And then we had Arizona. We got that right. They beat the Redskins. And then we went to Sunday night and actually got the Sunday night right. In prime time, the Eagles beat the Giants. They shut them out. And then we went to Monday night, and the Niners got the Rams. And so that put us to 11 correct, 3 wrong, and 1 push in week 6. It was the second best week. We had 12 correct in week 5. So let's see if we can keep it up there in double digits in week 7. But we'll see. But yeah, in the games, the Patriots on the road continue to show that they are a team that's competing for their division for sure, and don't count them out so quick as all the analysts were doing. I never doubted, Belichick and Brady. What are you, crazy? Come on, it's early in the season. And then the Browns, an impressive win against Pittsburgh in Cleveland. Definitely, I picked it, but I'm also still, the way they won by 3 touchdowns was impressive to beat their division rival like that. They lost in Pittsburgh in week 1 by just a field goal, and then to beat them by 3 touchdowns at home, that's impressive, and that's the kind of thing I like to see out of Cleveland. And then Denver going into New York, that game came down to the wire. It wasn't as close as the score indicated. Talib got that pick 6 at the end. when the Jets were looking to tie and send it to overtime. So the Broncos, they won that one on the road in New York, but they just barely. They're winning some tight games. They're making it interesting for sure, and they're going to have an interesting game this week coming up. I can't wait to see that one. And then the Lions, they went to Minnesota, shot them down, only allowed 3 points. They can't run the ball, but they actually did in that game. Joyke Bell did a pretty good job running. They did what they had to do, and they got it done. And so somehow, some way, they find a way to win. They got a great defense in Detroit. They just, got to get things moving on offense. Megatron's banged up. We'll see. Looks like they might just sit him until after the bye week. He comes back strong if they keep on winning games. Detroit, if they can get it going on offense, that defense can carry them, pretty far. So we'll see what happens. And then Green Bay, impressive win in Miami. That game right there, talk about excitement. That one came down the wire. They win by just 3 points at the end with the fourth quarter comeback. That was crazy. Impressive win in Miami on the road. It's always an impressive thing to do. Aaron Rodgers has been on point. They've been putting up numbers necessarily in the offensive yards, but they get in the end zone and they win games and they score when they gotta. So them Packers, they're definitely in the thick of things. And then Tennessee, Jacksonville, that was a game almost. That one could have ended up in a tie, right? I mean, geez. Of course, they won by 2 points there, Tennessee at home, in a game I thought would have had more points on the board and more offense. Bortles did have over 300 passing yards. I thought maybe Tennessee might put up more yards, but Jacksonville's defense ain't so bad. But I mean, even though the numbers for on their defense are really bad, but and when you watch them play, they're not as bad as they might look on paper. Then Baltimore and Tampa, that one was ugly. The Ravens just destroyed them. 28 points in the first quarter. I mean, it was bad. They were just really laying it on them. But they just, they really put a number on them in Tampa too. I'll tell you, the Bucks, man, they're just in trouble. But the Ravens, they play like that, they're going to be tough to beat. And they really, they got their running game going. Flacco, finally had a really good game. He was something like 21 for 29 or something like that. He was very accurate in that game, had a lot of yards, touchdowns. They just were hitting on all cylinders. And that defense is looking really strong too. So they're definitely going to be competing for their division. It's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out in the next few weeks. And then San Diego, Oakland made that one interesting. They almost won their first game. Derek Carr, he's got talent, but it's just not a lot of talent around him. They don't have a running game, and they have a decent secondary, but they have no running defense. And the Chargers, they're a really good team. Phillip Rivers is having an amazing year. They finally got somebody to run the ball too, with Brandon Oliver. It's finally a good replacement for Matthews, and he's going to eventually be coming back, so they got Matthews back. Watch out. And their defense is really good, but they ended up letting the Raiders, make this one interesting. So I think it's one of those things where it seems that when you're going against a team that's maybe not as good, you sometimes don't rise to the level of competition, you know what I mean? So you've seen what they did the week before. But then the Falcons and the Bears just said, I thought the Falcons would pull that one out, but it showed that they're still, not really going to be competing this year. If they can't win the games at home, if they can't beat the Bears at home, then where's the Falcons really going to be headed? I knew already that they were a team that wasn't good on the road, but I thought at least they were going to be strong at home. Of course, now we see the Falcons, they got that good passing attack, but the Bears held them. They got a defense. The Bears are, kind of a team that you got to keep your eye on, see where they go. But I mean, I don't know if they can compete with the Packers and the Lions necessarily, but maybe they can have an outside shot at a wild card. But you never know. It's still early in the season. I'll tell you, the game that really was a shocker was them Cowboys beating the Seahawks in Seattle. Talk about impressive. Looks like the Cowboys are for real. I know it's early in the season, and everybody, how many times we've been down this road with Romo where early in the season everything looks like it's going the Cowboys' way, but this time it's different. And I'll tell you why it's different, and it's because of DeMarco Murray. He is for real. I mean, he is the top running back in the league, and as long as they keep pounding the ball, giving him the rock, then the Cowboys are going to continue to win games. And that's really what's changed, because if you actually look at the numbers, their defense is actually allowing the same amount of yards per play that they did last year, but their defense ain't on the field for as many plays because their offense is picking up more first downs, and they're picking up all those running yards, and that's eating up the time clock, and that's giving them the advantage in the time of possession. And that right there is why the Cowboys are winning games. As long as they continue to do that, they'll continue to win. And I'll tell you, Romo, he's a really good quarterback. The thing is, though, is that in the past they were always, putting everything on him, on his shoulders. He had to do it all. And when it would all be placed on him, then eventually he would crumble under that enormous pressure. Because you just can't do everything. He's just one player. But now that he has a running game to support him, now he's got DeMarco Murray, and now that Murray is carrying him on his shoulders, and then you got Romo as the guy, and then he connects, with Dez and with Williams and Witten, man, that right there is a winning combination, even if that defense is a little suspect. But when the thing is, they're playing pretty good because they keep fresh. So as long as they keep fresh and they keep pounding that ball, then the Cowboys, they should win the East. Of course, they still got to compete with the Eagles, but right now it's looking pretty good for Dallas, and it looks like it is going to come down to Dallas and Philadelphia. I don't know if New York is going to really be able to hold in on this, race for the division title. You saw how they lost to the Eagles, and the Redskins ain't going nowhere. So it's coming down to Dallas and Philly, and that one is going to be fun to watch throughout the year to see those two teams trying to keep pace with each other. And I mean, it's right there, very competitive. The Eagles got a really good team too, and we saw them on Sunday night, the way they played, and definitely looking forward when those two teams meet up. Is they're going to be facing each other in Week 13 and then in Week 15, as the Eagles are going to be going to Dallas in Week 13, and then Dallas goes to Philly in Week 15. So that's all going to come down to the end. That's going to be November 27th and then on December 14th. So looking forward to those. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Still here in Week 6 Weekly Rewind. It's in the Cardinals and the Redskins. The Redskins made it a little interesting, but the Cardinals, Carson Palmer is back, and he's not 100%, but even, at 80% they said he was at, he's still playing better than a lot of quarterbacks, and he doesn't make mistakes, and he keeps playing the way he's playing. Arizona's going to keep winning, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in that division there with the, Seahawks and the Niners to boot. That's a three-way race for sure. So, Cardinals pick up another win at home. They just win. That's the thing. It don't matter how, but they win. And then when, like I said, New York and Philly shut them out. That was huge right there for them to shut out the Giants on prime time. That's a big win for Philadelphia. And that right there pretty much knocked the Giants out. I mean, I know it's early and there's a lot of football left, and the Giants, by no stretch of the imagination, are they mathematically eliminated, but that loss right there. And I mean, I know it's in Philly, so it's, if the Giants could still bounce back from that loss, but That one, to me, I think when we look back at the end of the year, we can point to Week 6, the Giants getting shut out by Philadelphia. That was what, really kind of ended their, hopes of winning the East. Of course, I could be wrong, and we shall see. Then Monday night, the Niners and the Rams. That was actually a very interesting game. It was closer than the scoreboard indicates. The Rams jumped out to that quick lead, 14-0 in the first, but then the Niners just took over in the second quarter, and then in the third. They made it close in the second. They scored 10 points before halftime, and then they just kept going in the third quarter. Of course, the Rams did get that field goal, to make it, within a touchdown. But then the Niners, they came back, they scored, and that was all she wrote. Welcome to another bonus edition of Upon Further Review. And in this edition, we'll be talking about the New York Jets at the New England Patriots. And this Week 7 matchup will be on Thursday Night Football, October 16th. You can catch that at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be simulcast on CBS and the NFL Network. So the Jets are coming in this game with a record of 1-5. They won their first game of the year at home against Oakland, but they have lost the last 5 in a row as they went to Green Bay, lost to the Packers, then they hosted the Bears and the Lions, who defeated them. They went to San Diego and got blanked by the Chargers, and then they lost at home against Denver last week. And as for the Patriots are 4-2. They lost their home, or the first game of the season in Miami, and then they went to Minnesota and won. Then they won their home opener against Oakland. Then they went to KC and they lost on Monday Night Football, but they bounced back with a huge victory at home against Cincinnati on Sunday Night Football. And then last week they beat the Bills in Buffalo. And now here we are in Week 7 where they host the New York Jets in Foxborough on prime time in front of a nationwide audience on Thursday Night Football. And it should be a pretty good matchup. There's some injuries on both sides. The Jets are going to be without Milner, their star corner. And the Patriots are going to be without Ridley or Mayo. But let's look inside the numbers. And when it comes to passing offense and passing offensive yards per game, the Jets are 32nd in the NFL, and the Patriots are 15th. Then when it comes to passing defense, the Jets are 15th, and the Patriots are 3rd. So without a doubt, the clear and decisive advantage in the passing game goes to the Patriots. As you see, they're kind of middle of the road this year for passing, but so is the Jets' defense. And the thing is the Patriots are coming on. They had a slow start, but they've been playing a lot better the last few weeks. So Brady seems to finally have gotten into the groove with his receivers. He's got some new targets, that he's dealing with. So plus, some health issues and everything. And then even if you look at how abysmal the Jets are when it comes to passing the ball, and the Patriots' pass defense is one of the top in the NFL, so they should have no problem shutting down the Jets' passing game. And then we look at the running attacks of both teams. And on offense for the Jets, they are 12th in the NFL when it comes to running the ball. And the Patriots are 18th. The Jets actually were doing better on the ball, but they've been falling off lately. And the Patriots, big question mark there is, even now with Ridley going down, Vereen's going to have to take over more of the carries, plus Bolden. And actually Vereen averages more yards per carry than did Ridley. Of course, Bolden, he hasn't got a lot of touches, and his average is pretty low, so we'll see how he does in Ridley's stead. But then we look at the run defense of both teams, and the Jets are 8th in the NFL against the run. The Patriots are 14th. And the Jets, again, they've been falling off when it comes to the running game. They were even better, but lately they have not been doing as good. They let up 100 yards to Hillman of the Broncos last week. But you still got to give the advantage, regardless, to the Jets when it comes to the running game. That is kind of their strength on their team, be it on offense or defense. When it comes to the run, that seems to be where they put their emphasis on. That's where most of their talent is. The Patriots kind of struggle to run the ball. Of course, their run defense is decent, but I still give the running game advantage Jets. Now we look at points scored. The Jets are 30th in the NFL when it comes to points scored, and the Patriots are 8th. And when it comes to points against, the Jets are 25th, and the Patriots are 11th. So advantage Patriots when it comes to the scoreboard. I mean, the Jets struggle. There only 2 teams are worse than them when it comes to putting points on the board. Of course, part of that due to the shutout that San Diego handed them a couple weeks ago. And they also, not only can they not score, they can't stop teams from scoring, as they are way down there, 25th. I mean, that's pretty bad. The Patriots, on the other hand, they are right up there with the best of them when it comes to scoring. They're top 10, they're number 8, and they're just outside the top 10 when it comes to points allowed. And, I mean, if you take away that KC game, they'd be up a lot higher. So, the Patriots, they're really good at putting on points on the board, and they're good at stopping other teams from scoring. That's what they should do here in this game. They shouldn't have too much problem with the Jets in New England. It's actually a rainy day. We'll see if that affects the game at all. And the conditions, of course, that might play in favor of the Jets because rain tends to make it more of a running game. But the Patriots seem to pass the ball regardless, rain, sleet, hail, or snow. So I definitely think the Patriots should get this one, even without, Stephen Ridley. I think Shane Vereen will probably have a really big game, and even Bolden is probably going to do pretty decent. We'll see, how many touches he gets. I expect Brady to be getting the ball around to all his receivers. He should, take advantage of that Jets secondary, and especially the injury to Milner. So expect Brandon LaFell to have a big game. Of course, Gronk should have a really good game too, and Tim Wright as well. Like I said, I expect to see Shane Vereen get a lot of yards out of the backfield, catching the ball as well as running it. I think they'll probably be giving more of the touches to Bolden. He'll be doing more of the dirty work in the trenches for the Patriots. And then you'll see Vereen, more kicking it to the outside and getting the screen passes and whatnot. So, and the Patriots win this one. They just could make it interesting. It's possible. These 2 teams always play each other pretty close and give each other a really good, game. They're very competitive in their division, even when the Jets only, near the bottom, they only have 1 win, but they still show up for the games against New England because this is a fierce rivalry regardless. So, you could see the Jets make it interesting. Of course, I think the Patriots are more likely to just blow them out, and this thing could get ugly. The Jets actually did beat the Patriots last year back in October, but other than that, the Patriots had won 5 in a row against the Jets, and they've kind of owned them over the last few years. So I expect to see more of the same here on Thursday Night Football. At least that's what I think. I think the Patriots win this one by double digits. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Very interested to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment to tell me what you think is going to happen in this game. And if you like this show, make sure to hit the like button to let us know. Otherwise, we would not know. And also, if you want more of this content, make sure to subscribe, as we do upon further reviews for each and every single game, as well as recaps for each and every single game in NFL football. We're also covering the Major League Baseball playoffs all the way through the World Series, and we do cover some college football as well. And we do our weekly show, The Wedge. Make sure to check that out, where we do our quick picks, fantasy football picks. We do a weekly rewind, and we also have this Thursday night upon further review as part of that show. We also make it available separately as well. But once again, thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. Hope you're having a great day and you have a great weekend, and enjoy all of the sports.